Good evening. Radical changes in taxation and record levels of borrowing. That's the Chancellor's formula to prevent a lasting recession. In today's emergency budget, he announced he was pumping £20 billion into the economy. VAT will be cut from next week, but there'll be significant tax rises after the next election to pay for it all. Well, tonight we have the detail and the analysis. In a moment, our economics editor Hugh Pym will be asking if the measures can work. Our business editor Robert Peston looks at the consequences of living with debt. And Mark Simpson will be asking what it all means for communities throughout Britain. But first, our political editor Nick Robinson reports on the plans to spend now and make us pay later.
Today we learned how sick the British economy really is. We learnt about the government's plans for shock treatment, and we learnt that the pain may last for many years to come. Prescribing treatment was the Chancellor's lonely task today. Some say it could be the basis of a cure. Others that he's risking doing even more harm to the ailing patient.
Statement, the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Alistair Darling may not look like a gambler, he may not sound like one, but this afternoon he took a massive bet using your money.
For there is a choice. You can choose to walk away, let the recession take its course, adopt a swim or sink or swim attitude. Or you could, as I have decided, as have governments of every shade around the world, to support businesses, to support families, by increasing borrowing, which will also reduce the impact and the length of the recession.
He spelt out the symptoms of that recession, a sharp and he hopes short slowdown in growth and borrowing on a scale never before seen in Britain. £500 billion will be borrowed in the next 5 years, more even than when Dennis Healey was Chancellor and was forced in the 70s to go to the IMF.
As a result of the combined effect of lower revenues, our commitment to maintain spending and extra support to the economy, borrowing will rise to £78 billion this year and £118 billion next, or 8% of GDP.
When the Chancellor promised to get borrowing back under control, Tory MPs could scarcely believe their ears.
By 2015-16, we will again be borrowing only to invest. This means
they know that every time this government's given a prognosis on borrowing, it's turned out to be wrong. The Chancellor looked at a range of treatments to pay for a stimulus to the economy. Higher child benefit, higher pensions, increased spending, help for small businesses, but above all, a tax cut in a package worth, in total, £20 billion. Most of that pays for a temporary cut in VAT, from 17.5% to 15%, beginning next Monday.
this temporary reduction is the equivalent to the government giving back some £12.5 billion to consumers to boost the economy. We would like retailers to pass it on as soon as they can. It will make goods and services cheaper, and by encouraging spending, it will help stimulate growth.
Gain now will be followed by pain later. The Chancellor spelt out the need, after the next election as it happens, for tax rises and much tighter government spending. So going up will be national insurance for all, duties on fuel, alcohol and tobacco, and income tax for the rich. It marks a break from the promise Tony Blair gave not to touch income tax rates, all in the name of fairness. Watch carefully, this is the first time in more than 3 decades that a Labour government has explicitly and openly raised taxes on the rich.
It's right, as we all benefit fairly from the exceptional measures we take today, that we should all share fairly in the burden of the future.
The gamble at the heart of this budget: will voters spend now, or will they instead focus on the pain that is to come? The Conservatives warned that this was a Christmas present that the country can ill afford.
It is confirmation of the time-old truth that in the end all Labour chancellors run out of money, and all Labour governments bring this country to the verge of bankruptcy.
People often complain there's nothing to choose between the parties. It's a claim that's rather hard to make after today.
The Chancellor is borrowing more on the nation's credit card than all previous governments put together. And now he is taking out another credit card. For still, like the gambler who can't give up, he thinks he can borrow his way out of debt.
The economic crisis began, of course, with the banks, and the opposition parties are warning that just because the recession's begun doesn't mean the credit crunch is over.
The Prime Minister tours the world a little bit like a celebrity heart surgeon, lecturing the uninitiated on how to carry out financial heart transplants. But meanwhile, the patient back here is suffering very badly because the banks are cutting credit and greatly increasing their margins.
And perhaps inevitably tonight, other opposition parties are digging through the budget, picking out the things they don't like.